Hi, I'd like to welcome everyone to the first interview for the CCaaS Industry Update newsletter. This was prompted by a conversation I had with somebody after I launched my beginning article, and I'm very, very grateful for their time and joining me today. OJ contacted me and we had a really good chat, and it's really formed the basis for this interview that's going to take place today, because I think there's a lot of shared experiences and commonality that you guys listening will find useful. So I'll go straight in and intro OJ. He's a dad, husband, gamer, snowboarder, golfer, many things, with nearly 20 years of international work experience as a CX and CX technologist. He believes in the necessity to bring technology and business together in effective and efficient collaborations. He holds a degree in information systems and an MBA obtained in Prague. He's experienced in building multi-cultured cross-border technology teams that focus on an operational support for organizations on an international scale. He's been in the telecommunications industry since 2005. He's worked as an engineer, designing and deploying solutions across EMEA and APAC. And over the last 5 years, he's led a team of Genesys consultants supporting contact center operations and architecture for an international financial institution. Well, welcome, and thank you for being here, OJ.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction, and then I appreciate your time as well on this.
No worries. I was saying to OJ just before we started here, this is my first one of recording an interview like this. So anyone watching, forgive any technical hiccups. Advice always gratefully received. If this becomes a thing and more professionals like OJ want to lend their time to me so we can make this relevant, I'll get better, I promise. But we're going to launch in then. We've got a few questions we're going to run through. OJ and I have already talked about these, and as I say, I think he's got some really relevant insight, not just for what's happening right now in the recruitment marketplace, but for what's happened previously as well, and how that's changed. But so OJ, start by telling me and the people listening a bit about your background within the Genesys world and how you've arrived in your current role.
All right. Well, first of all, I started out in the Alcatel industry in around 2008, 2009. Back then, Alcatel still owned Genesys, and I was a voice and data engineer. And at that stage, then moved into the contact center environment within Alcatel. However, that was also sort of the time that they had started pioneering the OTCC Premium, which was sort of a one-click install based on Genesys. So you sort of had your framework, your solution control service environment. And I remember fondly using GAD for the agents, funny enough. So that was sort of my initial introduction to what Genesys is. And then, I mean, virtually just understanding that it's a bunch of components under the hood. And I gradually then post, let's say 2010-ish, became more exposed to Genesys, and in 2012, 2013, made that migration to becoming a full Genesys engineer, and then realizing, how crazy it actually is rather than just a one-click install. So, I mean, I suppose it's around 10 years now that I've been actively working or touching on the Genesys landscape.
Okay. And what have you seen in terms of, I guess the Genesys have undergone huge product changes. What do you think have been the key kind of milestones over that 10-year period that you've been involved with them?
For myself personally, wow, we've sort of managed to run a. Oh wow, you just caught me completely off guard. I'm sorry. Maybe first point of editing there.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Look, this is a natural conversation. People listening, yes, OJ and I have had some chat in advance, and but there isn't anything this guy doesn't know. Trust me. So my apologies if I blindsided you with the odd question there.
No, I mean, look. I think some core aspects, we drove, or at least in my career. I mean, I've worked with some great people in the design and deployment of Genesys solutions across EMEA, across APAC. One of the closest to my heart was actually managing to deploy Genesys throughout. I think it was like 6 or 7 countries in Africa, where we ran a strict replacement strategy, and it was sort of a long-term process where we initially only put in the GVPs, which was connected to the old telephony platform then, and gradually, they migrated these solutions to full-blown Genesys solutions. And when COVID hit, there was a huge push in that environment. And I mean, this is post me leaving, but I've always kept up to date with the guys, and they've subsequently moved from Engage to cloud. So I think that one holds close to my heart. But within my current environment, we support, or my team supports, 7 countries across the APAC region, and I think we touch on very many Genesys components within GVP, Infomart, GIR, GIA and Nuance for the voice bot solutions, e-services, crossing Facebook, Twitter, the chatbots, and then we also work with a couple of third-party vendors for the likes of Instagram integration, and then I think one of the core sort of achievements that we've had is we've written over the last 4 years. We have a custom development and integrations team, and they've written a custom integration module where we integrate to our external or internal business services for data manipulation, data pushing to Genesys. And then, in this regard, I mean, we're managing in some countries between 8 and 11 million call attempts, per day on OCS. And to give you an idea, you have to then scale your solutions to meet those requirements and so on, based on Infomart, GIR, etc. So yeah. I think over the last 10 years, I have very many sort of like things that I hold close to my heart. Overall, I think Genesys has come a long way, and then so do the people that sort of work in the environment. And it's evident in when you actually go to the market to look for these people. You can generally follow those career paths. Yeah,
absolutely. And that touches nicely then onto the next question I was going to ask. So as you pointed out, you've been running a team within the Genesys world for a long period of time now. Maybe nowadays we think about the world post COVID, whether we're post COVID or not, that depends on what country you're in and the viewpoint of leadership. But something we talked about was how you found your experience of recruiting Genesys professionals pre the pandemic era. So just summarize how you found that, the difficulty levels, any challenges there were or not, and I guess that, looking at things we're talking about a bit now, like salaries and stuff like that. How did you find it pre-pandemic period hiring those Genesys people?
The good old days, as I would call it. I mean, it's I think the environment back then was a lot less, I think, what's the word? Competitive, in the sense that, your website advertisements, maybe a Glassdoor or a LinkedIn post, those kind of things garnered, a lot of attention. It drew a lot of attraction in market. And I wouldn't say that it was difficult to attract Genesys tech talent. I think the sort of pre-COVID era was more attracting the right Genesys talent. I mean, you could have always, and this was sort of my experience early on, as a manager or someone who is looking to bring on board technologists in the Genesys spaces. You could go, to a LinkedIn groups or even just drop a post on your wall, and you would be within, let's say, 2, 3, 4 days, fairly inundated with guys saying, hey, look at my profile. Hey, here's a resume. Do you have time for a chat, and so on. So I think pre-COVID era, it was fairly easy to sort of attract these people. I think it wasn't too difficult.
And what about salary demands then? How did you feel candidates you were speaking to then pre-COVID, how did you feel their salary requirements and requests were aligning with your expectations?
I think it was easier to meet salary demands. I sort of find people were, I hate to use the word, but people were realistic in salary demands. And then I think as a recruiter yourself, you probably have seen this, that there has been a huge change in how people approach their asking or their demands on benefits, salaries. And I think I also want to, I think maybe want to say, like, back then, a semi-decent or a decent salary and a few benefits were really good enough, but over the last 2-3 years, with the advent of work from home, work from anywhere, these key job keywords like digital nomads, those kinds of things, it's, people have started looking for much more than just a good salary. And I think the crazy part here is that being a Genesys resource, specifically Engage, in my opinion, is there's always a high level of demand for these guys. And I think this has also sort of pushed that bracket. So yeah, I think 2018, 2019, even maybe like early 2020, salaries were manageable, and then you didn't hear someone drop a value and say, hey, I'm not talking to you unless you drop 12 bar net, or 12k net, euros. And then you sort of raise an eyebrow and go, well, I mean, it's nice meeting you, your hair looks nice, type of thing. I don't know. So yeah.
I think one of, you highlight there that the change, I guess, from from active candidates to passive candidates, that period of time when posting, putting lines in the water, for a fishing analogy, and having that candidates being out there doing the active hunting, looking for opportunities, and therefore finding those lines you're putting out there and coming to you. We've certainly seen that change as on the recruiter side of things as well, to candidates becoming more passive and waiting for companies to approach them, or recruiters like myself to approach them. And that's not just in the Genesys world, or even within the CCCX world, or even within the technology world. The company that I'm part of, we have recruiters in various fields, and they've all seen that change as well. So I think there's been a social shift over that pandemic period. And I think one of the things you and I talked about before, and something I think the people listening will find very relevant if they're out there recruiting, is that salary change. And so I guess I'd like to kind of follow that on then and say, right, in this period during and post-pandemic, what have been the big things that you've seen as challenges, barriers to you being able to recruit those Genesys experts that you're looking for?
I think, firstly, like that sort of lockdown period, or let's say the COVID period, made or forced a lot of companies into I almost want to say like a digital recruitment stack, or a digital recruitment world. And this sort of had this rolling effect that you saw a lot of spam, in the sense like someone I know, for example, is a Linux administrator. And I mean, I've actually seen some of the guys that reach out to him on LinkedIn, for example, and it would be really just the basic of, hey, I have this great opportunity, let's chat. And these guys would get 5, 10, 15 of these in a week. And I think that has made life more difficult for people actually looking for talent, that's really important for them. And secondly, I've also seen sort of this crazy, I don't know if you guys see it in your general aspect, but this craziness of people actually just buckling under the pressure and starting to pay these exorbitant fees that the guys are asking for, or really like trying to bend over backwards to accommodate crazy benefits. So I think for me, those are the two really key points post-COVID, or I mean, I've actually recently in the last 6 months gone through this, where, to give you a good idea, the lady that in our recruitment team that's working with me, bless her soul, she contacted, and then these are actual numbers, she contacted 394 Genesys professionals with more than 5 years of experience, right? 394. Of the 394, 16 responded, okay? And I only managed to get 2 of them to actually sit down for a chat. The other 14 were either too expensive, or they weren't willing to relocate, or sort of work within the confines of the role that I had available, or have available. So yeah, and then like I mentioned to you the other day, one of these two candidates that I spoke to literally said, like, dude, if you're not willing to drop 12K net, I'm not really interested in the discussion. So I think a key aspect for me here is that good resources that you used to have in the market have now bedded down. Maybe organizations are starting to realize the real value in these guys, and they're starting to look after them. Perhaps counter offers, or I don't know which way they're going, but those highly skilled guys that you were looking for have sort of dissipated into the depths, if you want to go back to your fishing analogy, right? And then and you really, like, you have to go, like, you have to have heavy sinkers to get to them, and then when you reach them, it's when you've got to make sure that bait is sweet. So it's difficult. That it has become very difficult, in my opinion. And I'm not even an active recruiter. I'm literally just someone who's looking to fill, or who looked at filling two positions.
But I think, a lot of the people probably listening to this are either going to be like yourself, active recruiters, in terms of, hiring managers, or probably people, specialists, experts, the sort of people that, you would consider as an applicant, a potentially suitable applicant for the role. And they're going to be sharing those experiences. And I think that's why this is so relevant. It's ideal as the first one of these for me to do, because sometimes people can feel a bit alone in that. And they think, am I right in what I'm hearing and seeing? Am I looking in the wrong places? Why isn't this happening? And your recruitment colleague there, she's doing a heck of a lot of work for a very small percentage return. And it's cutting through, as talking about the example you gave of your friend who's a Linux administrator. As a recruiter that has a really genuinely good opportunity, like your colleague or myself, it cutting through the rest of that noise in a very, what has been over the last 2 years, a very congested field, is really the first trick. And then you will get those candidates, as you say, that are saying they're looking for X amount, and that is perhaps their primary motivation. I think that the reasoning, and I want to be careful not to insult people. They might be listening to this who say, do you know what, I'm worth every euro, every cent, every dollar, whatever of that. And you absolutely might be. I think permanent salaries have generally in the Genesys field tracked upwards over the last 7 or 8 years. Contract rates have fluctuated a lot more, but what I'm seeing now, and I suppose, and again, it depends on what country you're in, the end of the pandemic period, or whatever this plateau is that we're at, as different sorts of headlines are coming out about recession and economic hardship and cost of living, people are bedding down, to use the expression you did there. They are settling in and saying, I want something with stability and longevity. So then prizing those candidates out of those roles, cutting through the rest of the spam that's out there, prizing them out of those roles. That package, that financial remuneration is going to play a part in that, but also so should the opportunity. And again, that goes back to cutting through. So it's very difficult, and there's no one answer to it. And that's, if anyone's listening and thinking, great, I'm going to get the answer, this is the silver bullet, interview. That isn't it. I think it's about human experience and human interaction, and just trying to get somebody's interest and be able to talk to somebody that's genuinely interested. One of the things I asked you as well, has that experience then of recruitment over the last couple of years, has that changed the type of person you're looking for at all?
For me, that would be a hard no. And I think if you ask that question to anyone else who's looking to bring people on board, you sort of have an idea of who would fit your team, or sort of the type of person that you're looking for. And with all due respect, like you said, to everyone, you wouldn't jeopardize the delivery of your team, for example, or maybe bringing someone on board who is not team fit just because you're looking for someone. So I think from my personal perspective here is, I don't believe in that principle of let me settle for second best, because ultimately this has a huge impact internally as well. So, and I've actually spoken to 2 or 3 people that I work with closely within other organizations, and they've sort of taken the same stance with regards to other positions they have, and very rarely I think people change what they're looking for just because they can't find them. Because in the end of the day, I think out of lessons learned historically, if you do settle for something that you didn't want, you may end up doing duplicate work. You end up with a resource that is potentially not happy. And then I think the knock-on effect with that is just so much more than you holding out another 2 or 3 months to find someone that actually fits that position. So yeah, I do think that don't jeopardize on what you're looking for, because the long-term effect of this on your team, maybe even on the actual cost of getting that person on board, if it's someone that you're bringing on from outside of the country, or visa sponsorships, those kind of things, so really be sure is sort of how I approach this.
Absolutely. You mentioned looking at other markets and visas and things like that. So what solutions or what things have you come up with that have helped you fill those roles against this backdrop of these challenges we've talked about?
Well, I think the most important, the biggest change that we sort of made is we literally just went global in our search. And then, like I said earlier, or pre-COVID, we were pretty lucky in the sense that we were able to target the European market to bring on board resourcing. But now I've had to go, sort of into the APAC regions, back to my homeland of Africa. And, I was very fortunate. I found a great candidate who's joining us. But it was really blood, sweat, and tears to find these guys. And then, it's I think opening that sort of range that you're looking in, or opening that pool that you're looking in, has helped. But other than that, we just sort of stuck to the guns of pushing at the guys. Hey, we have this opportunity, and I think maybe reaching, or going back to one of the points that you made earlier, is cutting through that recruitment clutter that sits in the inboxes. I think that one of the key things that we try to do is really stay away from vagueness in communicating with the guys. And I think it's very key is that they actually understand what that principal engagement is about. Like, why are you contacting me? I shouldn't be left with a million questions just by that initial engagement. I think so. Yeah, that was one of the key things, is we made sure that we sort of pack as much content into that initial engagement. But definitely we've had to widen our scope.
If there might well be recruiters that have been listening to this message. I know I've obviously got a lot of connections on LinkedIn. Maybe they've stuck with this long enough. They're interested. They want to learn. There's your tip. Remove the vagueness. We see it all over LinkedIn. People saying, I want to see salaries on adverts and job specs and things like that. And that's a tricky thing. And that's a topic for another day, and something I'll touch on, the whys, the wherefores, why people do it and why they don't. But cut through the vagueness, be specific, get the attention of high quality people that way. And you're absolutely right. There's Genesys talent all across the world. I deal with people across Europe, and especially in South Africa as well. There's some fantastic partners and stuff down there, and all across North America and Canada. I can't cover the whole globe. I'm just one person, but I know there's strong Genesys talent absolutely everywhere. So just as a final question then, what way do you see the Genesys talent market heading in Europe? From what you've seen, that pattern over your career, and the conversations you've had from speaking to your colleague in recruitment there as well, what do you think? Where do you think it's going?
I think there's sort of some good points and some bad aspects that we've sort of noticed. And then I'm going to try and reference, sort of the last 6 months of the process that I've gone through. And one of there's a very age-old thing that we came across, and it's something that I've come across, throughout my career as someone having to hire, but it's people overstating on their resumes. 10 years of Genesys experience, and not able to answer basic framework questions type of thing. So I think the key here, or the main point for me on this part, is that it's very important, and maybe twofold here. If you're a Genesys guy looking to go to the market, make sure that your resume, your CV is actual and relevant. Don't overstate what you don't know. It's especially in a role like this. It's very key for us that, if I challenge you on technical aspects, that you can stand your ground. And then the other thing that, and this is something that I've seen new, or I haven't come across this, is I'd like to call it young blood, but guys that have 1 or 2, maybe 3 years of experience, and a 1-pager CV or a 2-pager, nothing against that, but these guys then come into the market demanding senior resource salaries. And then I remember fondly, like, when I joined as a Genesys engineer, sort of, yes, there was a general increase, like you mentioned, in the salary structures and so on, but looking at what these guys are asking for now, it's in line with what your senior resources are asking. So I think being realistic is, the guys should also start looking at realistic expectations. And then I think those are sort of the 2, let's say, key things around this. And then the last point maybe here is that I've noticed senior resources, and then I said this earlier, is they're really they're becoming very scarce in their openness to leave their environments, and perhaps it's related to the current, maybe like you said, the looming recession, or the fact that companies are starting to look after their people because they're realizing how difficult it is to reach out to new talent or bring on board new talent. So I think those are my sort of thoughts on this, on where it's heading.
Wonderful. Well, summarizing it there, I think a lot of people can share the experiences that we've touched on in this conversation. OJ's tips there, if you're an applicant thinking, how am I going to make myself noticed? I think it's be honest in your CV, be realistic, and if you're a senior person that's bedded into a company, maybe take a little peek over the parapet, see what else is out there, because I always say to people, it might not be now, but if we have a conversation, I might be able to find you that unicorn role in 6, 12 months, 2 years. I've been very fortunate to deal with some candidates over many years, and you can find people the next best thing. Doesn't necessarily even mean there's something wrong with their current role. But OJ, again, thank you very much for your time. It's been wonderful. You've been an excellent first guest. That's it. The record's set. Whoever else wants to be interviewed on the CCX industry update, reach out to me. Let me know. You've just got to beat this guy. So OJ, thank you very much again for your time.
Thank you very much, James. Appreciate your time as well. Good luck. Cheers.
Take care, sir.